I'm the listener. I work on the former analog work now with the right team.
Okay.
Better use of instruments in the field, but also obviously the mission.
Emily Love from GPL. I develop Earth and also planetary science data visualization and analytics systems.
Brian Day with NASA Survey. Work with Emily and the team to develop the solar system tracks visualization and analytics portals, which are now being extended to the Earth, and we want to really focus on analog applications. And I'll also add that I'm a proud survivor of the expedition to the Bumpus Heldman site of Mount Lassen.
Forgot about that.
Hi, I'm Mithun from CU Boulder, postdoc, working on telerobotics and VR analogs.
I'm Esther Beltran. I'm the deputy PI for Survey Reveals. I'm based in Orlando, but this survey is based in Georgia Tech. I am actually a flight surgeon, and I train military pilots in all these simulations and analogs and difficult terrains and extreme environments. And we're looking forward to this and how we can apply this to the moon and to any kind of planetary surface.
Hi, I'm Maria Banks. I'm on the Survey Treks team, and I'm at NASA Goddard.
Hi, I'm Jeff Gillis-Davis. I'm PI of the Survey ICE 50 team, and I'm from University of Hawaii and WashU, kind of all at the same time.
Hi, I am Paul Canton. I'm a recent physics PhD, but I'm mostly published as a stellar.
I'm a and I'm president of a company, STC. We have a contract here at Ames and other centers and NASA centers, but I'm interested in the analog part. We're looking at possibility helping another company organize in Antarctica. So that's the interest in the analog.
Hi, I'm Leah Bartlett, and I'm an undergrad at UC Berkeley studying geophysics, and I'm an operations research intern here at Ames in the OCFO, so I'm just here to listen and learn.
Okay, do we get everyone in the room? I think so. And Ricky Guest from Survey is in the back making the magic happen, so I want to acknowledge him too. Thank you, Ricky. We also have folks online, so I want to acknowledge them and let them introduce themselves. So hopefully we have the audio working. Thank you for your patience on that. I'm just going to go down the list of participants. And if you unmute your mic while you're talking, then in theory, we will also be able to hear you online and in the room. So we'll start with Alexandra Mariela Novak. Are you on?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Whoa, yep.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Matija Novak, and I'm at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and I'm currently on the Vortices team, and then I've also worked with Jen on other analog research.
Great, thank you. Dale, just going in alphabetical order, first name.
Okay, I'm Dale Weinberger. I'm at the University of Washington. I'm working on developing ice melt probes to get into subglacial lakes because I think they're interesting analogs for ocean worlds.
Thank you. Enrico Flamini.
Hi, hello. Enrico Flamini, former chief scientist of the Italian Space Agency and now president of the International School for Planetary Sciences. We have quite a long story in analogs. We have an analog site in the Moroccan desert where we currently do tests.
Wonderful. Thank you for calling in. I don't even know what time it is for you. Jeff Mersch.
Hi, I'm Jeff Mersch. I'm at the University of Tennessee. I do analog work in South America, the Atacama, the Andes, up in the Arctic, various other places. My usual role is to provide remote sensing context for some of these analog projects. And my latest new toy in that regard is I have a NASA planetary major equipment grant that's paying for a very large octocopter that carries a hyperspectral imager that can do AVIRIS or CRISM-like data acquisition over a terrestrial analog site. And as part of a PME, I'll advertise a little bit that part of the function of that is to make that available to the community. So I'm going to be presenting some abstracts at various conferences to advertise that.
Super. Thank you very much. Matt Deans.
Matt Deans at NASA Ames. My interest in analogs is primarily having to do with software for mission operations, as well as testing robotics technologies in planetary-like environments.
Super. Thanks, Matt. Bonnie Posselt.
Hello, hi, I'm a UK flight surgeon on exchange with USAF at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I was the medical doctor on a desert analogue with the Austrian Space Forum 18 months ago. And I work as part of a panel with a number of other doctors from NASA and ESA, trying to improve the medical provision safety across the whole platform of analog missions. So this is the first time that one of us has been represented here. So I'm just here to listen and see what the group's about. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Brian Shiro.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Shiro with the USGS and University of Hawaii. Been involved with various analog projects over the years in different places, but most recently the High Seas program on Mauna Loa, where I've directed some of the operations as well as the geophysical exploration of the surroundings. And that's my primary interest these days too, is in applying geophysical techniques to exploring volcanic terrains. Thanks a lot.
Super. Thanks, Brian. Don Hood.
Hi, everyone. My name is Don Hood. I'm a PhD candidate at Louisiana State University. I've done a little bit of analog work doing mineralogy and geochemistry, both remote and in situ, and I'm excited to hear what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Elise Rump.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So I'm Elise Rumpf, and I'm at the USGS Astrogeology Center in Flagstaff, and I'm part of the group here that's developing a terrestrial analogs program to help facilitate field work in the area and in other places. And I'm also a member of the recently selected Survey Geodes team.
Perfect. Thank you. Jeff Marlowe. Jeff, are you still there?
How about now?
Perfect. Yep, gotcha. Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff. I'm a postdoc at Harvard University, where I'm studying microbes in extreme environments, mostly the deep ocean, and thinking about how they get by and how we measure metabolic activity in analog environments.
Super. Thank you. Kelsey Singer.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Singer. I'm at the Southwest Research Institute in Boulder, and I'm part of Alex's Survey Espresso team. And I have worked on impact craters as analogs, but I also work on a lot of other different features across the solar system. So I'm looking to expand my analog work, especially with landslides. And we're also getting into some drone research here at Squirry. So interested to hear what others are working on.
Great, thank you. Lauren Edgar.
Hi, I'm Lauren Edgar. I'm a research geologist at the USGS in Flagstaff, and I'm leading our terrestrial analogs program at the USGS. In my own research, I focus on Earth and Mars, and I'm a collaborator on the RISE survey team. And then in our USGS analogs program, we're trying to figure out how we can best support the planetary science community in training, research, data archival, and sample curation involving terrestrial analog sites.
Super, thank you. We're very happy to have USGS involved so we can all work together. M. Dill.
Michael Dilly. I'm a roboticist here in the Intelligent Robotics Group at Ames. Broad sensing interests, sort of just keeping tabs on opportunities in this domain.
Great, thank you. And Rob Wagner.
I'm on the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter Camera and Shadow Cam science teams, and I'm basically just interested in Earth analogs for various landforms.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's everyone online. Did I miss anyone online? Okay, we'll call it a win. So Survey is a virtual institute, so this is why we have both in-person and remote participation. So during any of the discussions, anyone remotely, feel free to chime in at any time. We can hear you loud and clear in the room. And then for folks in the room, if you want to say anything, we have a mic we can throw around the squishy cube so that people online can hear you as well. Okay, so I just wanted to remind everyone, we do have a charter. It's up on the Survey website. We just put this together in the last year or so. So I will read it to you. Terrestrial analog field studies give us the unique opportunity to prepare for robotic and human planetary missions. We have the opportunity to conduct studies and tests related to science, mission operations, and technology in relevant environments at relatively low cost and risk. So probably everyone attending this meeting knows this already, since that's probably why you're here and doing some aspects of that work. So what we're trying to do in the Analogs Focus Group is bring together members of the community to discuss and review various aspects of fieldwork, including but not limited to field sites, logistics, instrumentation, ConOp, software, hardware, et cetera, et cetera. And as the breadth of this group grows, we're already having different types of work being represented, which is great because it's showing the utility of doing the analog work to contribute towards future flight missions. So that's fantastic. And this charter is available on the Survey website as well. So next on the agenda, we just had a placeholder for some of the desired focus group activities. So this is a community group. So what we'd like to do is make this useful for what people would like to get out of it. One thing will be networking and cross collaboration and learning about different analog activities, whether it's in your field or outside of your field, different analog sites, et cetera. So one thing we're planning to do to help facilitate that is a quarterly seminar series. And we originally decided quarterly, not anticipating the giant response of people interested in analogs. So we may have to revisit that. So thank you to everyone who volunteered to give a talk, because we've got years worth of talks that we could do at this rate. So that's really, really great. So the July meeting is a little special because we do this in collaboration with Survey's Exploration Science Forum, which the people in the room are here attending. So for the folks that are online, thank you for your patience, since conferences tend to run late in the schedule, so that's why we started a little late today. But the rest of the quarterly meetings will be entirely virtual, so we will actually be on time and keep the schedule. And so we'll use this collaborative tool, the Zoom tool that Survey has set up for us in order to do that. So that's one thing that we're trying to do is the seminar series to connect people and learn about what's going on and be able to advertise capabilities like Jeff was talking about. You can have this UAV that can do this great multispectral mapping, like that's fantastic. And if there are facilities or tools other people can use, that's something we'd like to help get the word out on. I'd like to can open the floor for a few minutes if there are other ideas of things that people would like to do with this group, things you would like to see us do above and beyond doing seminars and other things, or there's aspects that you'd like.
So something I think would be fun to do is review every now and again, and maybe it's quarterly or something, knowledge gaps in the community, and then identify, through what everybody is doing, how we might as a community help to address certain knowledge gaps that come up throughout the agency and perhaps in other agencies as well. Because I think sometimes what we don't know is what other people are doing and what's been done. It would be nice to know that and then see if maybe a knowledge gap has actually been closed out by someone or some group, and then also go forward and try and align ourselves with those knowledge gaps as a community. That would be really fun to do. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Darlene, for bringing that point, because I think as a follow-up action to that, that we document it, okay? Because if you don't document it, it gets lost. So we need to have somebody or a team or a committee or somebody that's committed to do this, that we have those knowledge gaps, because those are the ones that later on are give grants, and that we need to look for answers to those, right? But if we do not document it, then it gets lost. And I think that is a waste of time and energy. So.
This is somewhat related, I think, but one thing I think we should be investigating as a group, potentially with application to broader fieldwork across NASA as an agency and the groups that it funds, to start to establish a community-supported code of conduct for fieldwork. We're a small enough group that this is the kind of thing that we can actually kneel on something, but it's really important, particularly when you're dealing with remote sites and potentially vulnerable individuals. So I've found that it can be really difficult to establish a actionable code of conduct at an institution, because lawyers like to think that opens you to problems. But if it's something that comes from the ground up and we can take it to higher levels at, say, NASA, as something that you might be able to implement in the future as a requirement for, say, P-STAR funding, that might be a way to implement something that's easier for me to establish for my teams.
Yeah. Following what Esther said, I think there's a large number of documents dealing with simulations and simulators. So it would be great if we can have a library of those that all of us can scan at our convenience.
Good. Mark Henley, and what Madhu he reminded me too, he was instrumental in helping start a Moon Village Association. Yeah. So there is an association that I joined recently, which aims to have a village on the moon with people, and there is an analog activity related to that I think would be important to coordinate, and I would suggest coordinating with other all of the other different analog groups, if there are, to what extent there are others, that would be for the chair people or the group as a whole, an important goal.
Are there folks online who have anything you want to add to this discussion of what you would like to see the focus groups focus on?
Yes, is Enrico Flamini speaking?
Yep, go ahead.
4 months ago, say 5 months ago, we brought up to the United Nations Organization for Space Activity let's say the issue of the evidence that having a different kind of analog terrain needs organizations in many places of the world, some kind of overall coordination would have been beneficial for anyone. For example, the idea of having some kind of library for whatever is related to analogs, as well as a database with the characteristics of each site, because we are ranging from Arctica to Antarctica to Atacama to Morocco Desert and whatever else. There are others. So any one of these has its own specificity and can be beneficial for one test or another test, one study or another study. So to have a panorama at global level will be beneficial. This has been accepted, this proposal, by United Nations. And then I think that this initiative within Survey is perfect as a good ground to grow up in this sense.
Okay, thank you. Those are all good thoughts. Yep.
This is another comment that I think the group, to the extent that activities on our moon may be an analog for further exploration, I think it's important to consider and encompass that as part of the charter.
Okay, and we're recording all of this, so we're capturing everyone's ideas and notes are being taken, so thank you. Okay, so continue to think about this, what you would like to get out of this group, what you would like to see, what would be beneficial for you for doing analog activities of various types. And feel free to email us those ideas. We will be compiling them. It's always good to ruminate for a while and get sparked with some inspiration, and then send us some ideas, and we'll do our best to coordinate and try and get the community working behind this. In the interest of time, I think we should move on to the next part of the meeting today. So as the kickoff to the seminar series, we wanted to have Darlene Lim, who's here at NASA Ames and Bayer Institute, give the first talk for the seminar series in talking about analog logistics and management. Darlene has a vast wealth of experience doing analog activities and whatnot, and there's a lot of lessons learned for folks that have both done this a long time and for people that are new. So,
I think you have to stop sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Darlene Lim. I'm here at NASA Ames, and I'm going to be talking about project management, the key to unlocking a team's full potential. So I've been asked to write a paper about the way that I've been managing analogs over the years. I've been working in the field and managing field teams since I was 19 years old. I have way less wrinkles. When I got asked to do this, the first thing that came to mind is, do I get to focus on all the failures before I kind of take you to some of the things that worked? So what you're going to get today is, I hope it'll actually address what you brought up regarding code of conduct, things that we've learned to do over the years to manage. And we decided to start, really kick off the analog working group. You know, now we have the listserv set up and so forth with this talk, because one of the things we want to do with this analog working group is identify cross-cutting themes, things that we can help each other with. And one of them, I think, should be project management. And I'll be honest, you know, I've found that over the years, project management, when it comes to being a PI or being an academic PI, is sort of an afterthought. It can be in many projects. In fact, it can be condescended to if you want to think about it at all. But I think it really is very important to figure out how you want to manage, what kind of manager you are, identifying your weaknesses, your strengths, building the right team and the right management support around the entire project in order to unlock the full potential of whatever it is that you're working on. So that's what I'm going to share with you today, are some of the kind of journeys that I've been through and some of the things I've learned along the way, and offer up some ideas that we can discuss as a community. I also want to make mention that, of course, I have a very North American-centric view of project management. We have a lot of people that have dialed, a lot of people that have dialed in, a lot of people that have signed up from around the world. There are going to be different, you know, perspectives, nuances. Hierarchies may become more or less important depending on where you are around the world. But I think nonetheless, there are going to be, no matter what culture, no matter what country that you've dialed in from or are participating from, there will be cross-cutting themes that we can sort of sort our way through as best as possible. So I am actually going to look at the issue of project management I had to put some ground rules in place for this presentation, or it could go on forever. So I actually want to start at the point that you have your analog funded. We can have a whole other session, I think, on how to select an analog, how to formulate your project, how to constrain the problem, how not to always assume you need to throw an astronaut or a bunch of EVA suits into the mix to make yourself, make your project a higher fidelity analog. So we can talk about all those things, I think, at another session, because I know that question comes up a lot. But let's just, for the sake of this talk, assume you have your project funded. Yay, so now what? So a little bit about me before we get started. This is me in the field. I work at NASA Ames. Hold on one second, just gonna make this small. I have a geology and a biology background. I'm from Canada, very friendly, and but now I live in the US, so I'm very aggressive. I've been leading field teams since I had a lot less freckles and wrinkles, and I came to NASA as a postdoc in 2004 because I wanted to conduct science and exploration research, and really, fundamentally, there's no better place in the world to do it but here. Just a little sidebar note too, I worked as an account manager for the advertising firm Leo Burnett many eons ago, and made ads for Fortune 500 companies. I also have 2 kids. I love Black Forest cake. I like to run. We can find out about each other as the years go on. So this is me. The other thing I wanted to tell you about, this will go forward. Uh-oh. There you go. Is that I've been involved, I've had a very blessed life and have been involved with a lot of different analog projects over the years. I've worked with, and also field work from the Arctic to the Antarctic and everywhere in between. So I've worked, with Desert Rats, with NEMO, very operational focused analogs. I've been working on a project called Basalt, Pavilion Lake, worked with Jen, many different projects, Finesse, Mars prospecting, so MVP, which, can you tell me? Thank you. My brain just had a little hiccup there. HMP, Hot and Mars Project, and most recently I've been working in the deep ocean in something called Subsea. So I work in the water, I work on land, I work kind of everywhere in between on different analog projects. One of the recent projects that we're just in the process of wrapping up is called Basalt, that many people in the room and on the line were involved with. And we just put out a series of papers in the special collection that you're welcome to peruse at another time. So that's kind of my background to give you a sense of where I'm coming from. Made a lot of mistakes, had some successes, and met some really amazing, amazing people along the way. What you're getting today, as I said, is sort of my first cut trying to put this paper together that I've been asked to write, and you'll get a kind of a process put in front of you that I'd love for you to interact with. So to start off with, let's talk about analog. So there is no perfect analog. Let's just put that on the table. But there are always perfectly great problems to be solved, and analogs are well suited to address issues that pertain to environments and targets beyond our planet. So field programs, such as analog missions, involve multidisciplinary participants from around the world who will meet 1 to 2 times per year under dynamic, intense, and demanding conditions. So put down your phones for just 1 second. Just spare me your brain for 1 minute. This, to me, this point two, is the most difficult thing about running an analog mission, is that you're super stoked. You just got a whole bunch of people funded. They're all across North America, potentially around the world, and you have to organize them so that they can meet once or twice a year for 10, 14, 30 days, live, work together, function together, meet goals together. And what is that? Maybe like 8% of your year you're going to spend in the field if you go out a couple times a year. 92% of it you've got to spend dealing with a remote team or a distributed team, and you've got to get them motivated, you've got to get them organized and aligned to a common goal. I think that's a cross-cutting theme anywhere in the world when you're dealing with these types of multidisciplinary projects. And really the key is you want to enable your team, so point number 3, to transition into an interdisciplinary whole. You start off multidisciplinary, you want to take them into interdisciplinary whole. And that's when the magic happens. That's when people have dropped their obfuscation and they've brought their experience and their sense of commonality, common purpose to the table. And that's the exciting period. And that transition is a very difficult thing to do as a manager, to take your team to that point, in my experience. So in order to put this talk together and kind of think through the problem of how to present something meaningful around project management of analogs, I pulled from a few different articles that I found over the years have been very interesting and useful to me. So there's one that's called Why Great Employees Leave Great Cultures. The author is Melissa Daimler, and she's actually head of organizational effectiveness and learning at Twitter. It's in the Harvard Business Review online, and you guys can read it. But this article delves into the elements of culture, and specifically how to meaningfully consider the value and importance of culture when building and maintaining a highly productive and innovative work environment. And the elements that she brings out that I've organized my talk around are behaviors, systems, and practices. And so a great culture is when all three of these particular elements are lined up and when the organization's espoused values. So there's a lot in that last statement there. That means you actually have to have values. And there are lots of projects that I've walked into where you're not exactly sure what the values are, what the goals are. So that's a first step that I'm going to talk to you about. So behaviors. What are behaviors? It's the creation of value statements and clear expectations. We heard about that already. I think Jen actually talked about that today in her award acceptance, which really resonated with me and I'm sure with many people in the room about setting expectations, I should say. The communication of value statements is very important as well. So once you've got them defined, communicating them, and then the enactment of value statements by leadership and by the organization. So you've actually, you got to walk the talk. And once all this happens, you know that you have a whole bunch of smart, very capable people at your disposal. So if you can get this done, if you can create some value sets, you can actually communicate them and enable people to align themselves to that. Suddenly you've got a lot of smart, capable people you can just let loose and they'll do exactly what you need to do to reach the goals that you've all agreed upon. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a snippet in terms of what that means to me in terms of running analog projects. So when it comes to setting expectations, what, who, when, how, so that's what I'll talk to you about. So defining them. Identifying internal and external stakeholders is very important. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I'll talk to you about what that means shortly. I communicate. So communication is very important to communicate these expectations. We do so early on, we do so often, and we also do so in something called just in time. So just before the event, as an example, I will communicate out safety regulations, things like that. We will connect internal and external stakeholders to the purpose and vision that you have agreed upon at hand and imbue them with an intrinsic motivation to see the project to success. This could be as simple as you have parked your 53-foot-long communications trailer, mission support trailer, in the middle of a small community in northern Canada. There are people that need to walk their dogs. Their dogs always pee where the trailer is. That inconveniences them. You need to go talk to them. You need to knock on the doors, and you need to enable part of your team to go and actually break down those barriers and communicate to people that this event is happening and why it's important, so that when they go there with their dog, they're like, oh, hey, Rover, this is cool. We need to go around. It's important, instead of grumbling their way through, because I can tell you those little grumbles can have a massive ripple effect. And those are the external stakeholders that I concern myself with, all the way from the permitting bodies to the cultural leaders of the area and understanding the cultural nuances and importance of that area, as well as the local, literally the locals, everybody that will have some sort of stake in maintaining the environment that you are studying. So some of the expectations, getting to the comment earlier around code of conduct, we have been setting those for our team for many, many years, because something that we have run into, which I'm sure many of you have as well, is that sometimes, and this doesn't just happen with the young people, in fact, a lot of times this is the perpetrators of this are not the young, it tends to be the more senior staff that come in, is they assume that a field analog is like a summer camp. It is not a summer camp, it is a workplace, right? So with that expectation in mind, you're gonna comport yourself in a different way than if it was summer camp. All of my camps are now dry. When I get onto the ship, the Nautilus, to go out to sea, they have made all of their ships dry. And sometimes, people will have a beer or whatever, that's adult drinking, that's super fine. But I bring this up and maybe very, common sense or maybe a little uncomfortable, but summer camps, or if you're going away for some sort of retreat, you can drink, but we can't drink on the workplace, right? Especially when there are safety and logistical issues at stake. So that is something which, funny enough, sometimes people haven't clued into. So I make that a very clear, very understood expectation about all the camps that we have. And so around that, we have used over the years, it's actually in very palatable, consumable language, something called the recognition of responsibility. We circulate this document here. It's gone through several evolutions since its inception at the Pavilion Lake Research Project. We now hand it out during all of our analog missions. And then Linda Kobayashi, who I worked with for many years, who has been our logistics manager, brilliant human being. She loves spreadsheets, so I love her, because what she does is she basically hounds people until they have read this, and they put their initials beside their name that they've read this document. And we talk to them about it. We have telecons about it. We help them decipher it so they understand the expectation as they walk into each one of our camps. The other thing, another expectation, something that has been a bit of a bane in many analog programs, is publication. You spend a lot of time prepping to get into the field, then you go into the field, and then people disperse, and there are so many bits of knowledge that tend to get lost. You get the, the core papers out usually, but there's so much else that you've learned, so many other offshoots, ancillary benefits of that activity that have been lost. And that to me has been a real shame over the years, and something that I wanted to improve upon with each subsequent analog. So what we have done as well is put together the BASALT publication guidelines. We put this out early, we put this out often, and we put this out just in time, just before you're getting prepped to put together that special issue. These publication guidelines give everybody an understanding of the expectations of collegiality. You do not scoop your buddy. You do not send out your buddy's data to other buddies that are not part of this program. You cite your funding source. You include the people that have contributed to the program, remembering that, and this is common sense to me, but not necessarily to everybody, so we put this out again very clearly. When you have an analog mission where you have had the chance to gather up data, you have probably been reliant upon the logistics manager more heavily than you think you have in order to be successful as a scientist. So think about whether for their career it might be beneficial to put their name on your paper, and be open-minded to that and be generous, because it does actually have a wonderful positive ripple effect outwards when you do that kind of thing. So we put that perspective out into the open with our projects very early on, often, and just in time. Let's see here. The other thing I wanted to mention, just to back up, somebody said this to me where they came on a reconnaissance trip with me, and were shocked with some of the things I had on the itinerary in a positive way. Not like, what are you doing? But what I do during a reconnaissance trip is I will go out and before even landing, identify as many external stakeholders as possible, as I mentioned to you early on, who those people might be. And then I'll go and meet with them one by one by one. I will take pictures of the places we're gonna stay, that type of thing. I'll also ask them very directly, who do you think could shut us down? And people always laugh, and they actually find that to be a very fun question to answer. And it actually shows to them that we have experience in running into difficulties locally, especially when you're operating in areas of some importance to the local community. And they're never offended. They're always excited to actually consider that and then try and break down those barriers with you. So again, it generates intrinsic motivation with your local stakeholders, your external stakeholders, that eventually get wrapped into the entire family. So there's a transition from external to internal. So all these types of things are being done very deliberately as we move through and set expectations. The other thing is we have to integrate different perspectives. So very purposefully, and again, these could be talks that we go on with for several different presentations, but there are various sensitivities that have to be taken into account as we move these projects in from multidisciplinary into interdisciplinary. So creating a safe environment for participants to express sensitivities early on. That can be anything from their food allergies to their sexual orientation to the fact that they feel unsafe in certain types of conditions. We want to be able to put that out in the open and allow people to have other people to come to speak about this openly and safely. That will help to create a safer environment. And we want to set the expectation that the environment is supportive of this. Inclusivity, it's just a word until you actually start to think about it and start to imbue the environment with that clear sense and that expectation of inclusivity. Zero tolerance for discrimination, for harassment, for bullying. We put those forward again at the inception of these projects. And we also try to state the purpose of making sure that these perspectives are integrated and these expectations are put out there. So one articulation of this purpose is that Arriving and thriving on Mars, as an example, or the moon will be an unprecedented endeavor for humanity. The way to meet this challenge is through a dimensioned approach, one that can only arise from convening people of different races, gender, background, and experience, and then enabling them to innovate at their fullest and collective potential. So we've put that there. I put that out there a lot so that it's anchored. We're not just focused on this project, but trying to use the project as a conduit for what we want to see on a grander scale. Communication, internal and external. Again, meetings. I get asked about meetings, like how often do you meet? Well, it depends on what kind of meeting you're talking about. So I'm giving you a simple example here. We've published on our meeting cadence and other papers, and I'm going to be putting this in our in this management paper as well. Meetings should serve a strategic or should be or tactical purpose, and meetings should be budgeted for in your proposal. So people have to spend a certain amount of time on telecons or in person. They've got a budget for that as best they can early on. Technology needs to be implemented to support meetings. They should be enabled. Users should be trained. If you're not familiar with Slack, with Drive, with Zoom, whatever, those kinds of expectations around tech should be put on the table quickly, and then people should be trained up on it. The frequency. So as an example, what we do is we have a kickoff meeting. It's usually face-to-face once at the start of the project. We have alignment team. I'll talk about what an alignment team is in a minute. We do that monthly. We have all hands meetings, which are bi-monthly, and work area meetings weekly to bi-weekly. So you can set your own thing. This slide is simply to say, when you communicate, you have to have a plan or people will sort of drift off very rapidly, especially if your project is 4 to 5 years long. Also, each meeting should have a purpose that's understood early on. Of course, the theme will rotate around the meeting. But for example, to map A to A, so A kickoff meeting is to enable the team members to share objectives, discuss work area organization, finances, and other related matters. When I think about it and abstract really what I like about kickoff meetings, it's that these human beings who are basically going to spend 92% of their time on the phone with each other, they get to come together and kind of sniff each other out for the first time, look each other in the eyes, realize that's another human being at the other end of the phone. You can't yell at them. You can't be a jerk to them. That's a solid, amazing human being, and we can get through this together. So that is one huge component of a face-to-face, especially at the start of a meeting, a project. B and C, alignment team, all hands meetings. So these are to report on what are called work areas. I like to call, instead of, basically the different sections of our projects have been called work areas very deliberately. And then we actually have alignment teams because what we're trying to do is make it clear that every person in our team has the capacity to innovate, to be a leader, to step up. But you need these people that will come together and be part of the alignment team to communicate as an intrinsic whole what some of the issues are that are being dealt with, what are the net outcomes of some of the work that's getting done, and then to align that again to the common stated purpose of the project. And D, these are research discussions that happen frequently within each work area, and sometimes they happen multiple times a day, multiple times a week. I think you've all had those kinds of meetings. So again, people understand the purpose, and we tell people often. The other thing that tends to happen in our analogs is, especially when we don't have a singular, type of analog. So you can have operation-focused analogs, science analogs. When you have analogs like what's supported, for example, through P-STAR, where you can bring science operations, and technology together, so you have a lot of people, again, in these multidisciplinary groups that to become interdisciplinary actually need to understand what the heck the other person's saying. We all bring a ton of acronyms to the table. We have common languages that we use within our work areas. You've got to cross that boundary, right? It's like crossing into a different country effectively with a whole bunch of different dialects. And so for science, what we did, for example, with Basalt, and we did this with other projects as well, is we created a dictionary, a lexicon of all the different, you can't really see it here, unfortunately, but it's like, what does alteration mean? What does different percent alteration mean? What does it mean to actually have, crystals embedded within the matrix? What is the word to describe it? We needed that because it had to be translated to those that were producing the EVAs and producing the tasks associated with the EVAs. And so all that language had to be clearly outlined, defined, and then communicated. Ditto for the operations group. They created a whole lexicon of what an EV crew member is, what an IV crew member is, what an EVA is, and what different target regions are. Surprisingly, we spent several telecons defining what is a region, what is an area, what is a sample, a section, like all those types of things, because people disagreed a lot. And then with technology, many different terminologies, which, UDP, like what mesh networks, like what does that mean? But it's important for people to understand it, even though they're not necessarily setting up those mesh networks, so they understand the whole. Systems. So this is another component of what was brought up in that Harvard Business Review document. So building and organizing, oops, just a second, let me back up. Let's see here, building and organizing the team. So there are many possibilities, as I've mentioned. I use work areas and alignment teams to signal that there are key people who must help integrate our project. We're very clear about goal setting on a weekly, monthly, and by mission basis and by work area and so forth. And again, these are simply what we do, what I've done over the years, but suggestions and examples to help you understand what these systems are. Decision-making processes. This is something that I will show you in a couple slides about how we actually try and anchor all our decisions very clearly in common purpose. And identifying talent and developing and enabling the talent, which is a form of reward. So we've had a lot of people start off with us as undergraduate students, as an example, and actually stay with different projects as they move along. They find that to be very rewarding. They find that to be important for their growth. Myself, as somebody that's had those types of people move through the system, it's been deeply rewarding to see these incredible people just kind of move through and become more and more capable. And that's something that I think these analog programs are very well suited to do. So enabling the components to interact and evolve as a collective is of paramount strategic importance. So let me just go to the next one here. Part of the systems that we set up, they can be in project management, much that the previous slide put forward, and that I'll develop more in the paper. But then there's the whole component of systems engineering. So Matt Deans, who's on the line, really led some of the projects that I worked on, led the architecture development of bringing together all the different systems engineering pieces. Well, Jessica Marquez is in the room too, and they're familiar with some of these little images that I've put up. What we do in terms of our engineering is we have to put in place the decision-making framework for the engineers as they develop, as they integrate with the ops and the science community. And so we will spend a lot of time scripting the requirements for each different work area as they pertain to tech development. We will then spend a lot of time prototyping timelines, as an example, before they meet their full form in software in software application. We'll also just spend a lot of time in front of whiteboards, sketching out the connections, as you see in the bottom left there, of how different components will meet together. I know many of you in the room are familiar with this. It's kind of, something you're like, of course, I do that. But there are also a lot of young people who are starting out that are on the line that I wanted to show them the type of rigor that can go into the development of our systems engineering. Let's talk about leadership. I have a few more slides here before I open the floor up. So aligning all of the elements of your program, the internal leadership. So what are the core work areas? These are questions that I ask myself. Again, I have only me as my sample size of 1 to put forward in terms of how I manage through these issues, but I look forward to, again, opening the floor to many of you. How do they need to be integrated? Who would be well suited to manage these work areas is something I wonder and then help to nurture through the group. What is the experience level of the work area team? How often should we meet? And what additional support will be needed to enable our team to thrive? So logistics manager, field safety manager, these are all things that I've kind of learned over the years become very important and that we should budget for at the get-go. When it comes to PI-ship, on a very personal level, I think it's important to ask, how will you lead your team? So this is for all of you, and maybe you've asked yourself various other questions, but for the young people out there, these are some things that I think are important to consider. Will you lead by consensus? Will you lead through hierarchy or other? And I think it's very important to be honest with yourself. What do you feel comfortable with? What do you think is best for the group? Can you actually do what's best for the group? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What could you improve upon since your last at-bat? I have always a ton of things I could improve upon from my last at-bat. And I think, again, last point that I said earlier, super important to be honest. In terms of the next slide, this to me, and Jen actually alluded to this morning as well in her presentation, this to me is kind of sums up some of the utility, I think, of a PI. Striving to be a multiplier and not a diminisher. There's a great book by a woman who's actually local, and she actually has, you can read the HBR article as well. It's kind of a summation of this. It's called Multipliers. It's by Liz Wiseman. And the key message here is that smart leaders get more out of employees, can get more out of the employees that they have. So let me read you this passage here from her HBR summary. Most companies are adept at bringing in smart, talented people, but few companies put as much discipline into understanding how fully they are using the talent they've acquired. Many managers are so focused on their own ideas and capabilities that they shut down intelligence around them. I call these leaders diminishers. Yet other leaders seem to amplify the intelligence around them. I call these leaders multipliers. So for me, I hope I am a multiplier. I am sure I am a diminisher from time to time. Hopefully it's less than the multiplier component, but like it's a thing, right? And our egos get in the way. Our lack of time, our lack of sleep get in the way. But I think ideally, especially when it comes to these analogs, where they're so complicated, or any mission for that matter, being a multiplier with a whole bunch of smart people in the room, man, oh man, you get a huge bang for your buck. It also means for me as a PI that I need to remember that in my line of work, I have to be satisfied, deeply satisfied with delayed gratification. Okay, I know many of you in the room that resonates with you. Because I think the need for immediate recognition, while that's super nice and awesome, it sort of distracts from attending to the greater goals at hand. Okay. So last thing, practices. Are there clear, repeatable decision-making processes in place in your group? Are these processes dependable when the project needs to grow, pivot, or realign? As an example, again, an example from our groups that have developed, this has been developed over the years, but was developed early on, probably in 2005, and then refined when I first started Pavilion Lake. So our decision-making principles for all of the analog projects that I've had the privilege and joy of leading come down to these three very basic things: safety, environmental stewardship, and then research. So there's a hierarchy here. Everything we do has to be safe. Next thing, are we actually taking care of the environment that we said we were going in to study, not destroy? And then the next thing is, let's make decisions that come back into our research and meet the higher level goals of the research. And that research is represented by research traceability matrices. Not every team does this. We always do this. It helps me when I get lost in our, on our journey to realign. This is built by each work area as almost like a stovepipe and then integrated. And in the case of basalt, this included the research traceability matrix included, of course, as a subsection, a science traceability matrix, which many of you have built for different missions. The purpose of an STM or an RTM is that it anchors each decision in articulated and democratized goals. Okay, that's huge because we do get wayward, and then this offers a Hansel and Gretel way back when conversations get hairy, and they get hairy. So again, some final thoughts. This was a very North American presentation, totally admit that. The management practices, leadership styles, sensitivities, and so forth will differ around the world. And we are around the world with this working group, but there are undoubtedly common cross-cutting themes. So the purpose of this as a kickoff was to find similarities, to find differences and nuances together and explore them, as I think this process will unlock insights for each of us to act upon in our collective interest to grow and develop the analog community. And that is it. So, thank you for listening. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I just read this awesome book. I can't remember the name of it. Well, I read it a couple years ago. You have to forgive me, but I can give you the name. It was all about the history of Apollo science and the management of that through the agency, through bringing in USGS. And what was fascinating to me is all the management issues that we deal with, that we hear about in the hallways, that we're living through, the creation of STMs, aligning people.
They dealt with that already. Same thing. People were worried that their bread and butter was going to get taken away and given to someone they didn't like. And so, again, delayed gratification, putting this whole journey into perspective. We'll get through this. I think we just have to kind of figure out a way which is collegial through it. That's kind of the purpose. Okay. What do you want to talk about?
Take questions?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it. Take questions or suggestions on other project management items you want to noodle on or anything else. I'll take notes. Go ahead. We have about 5 minutes until the next session in this room, so we'll go till we can't.
Thank you. I just want to tell an anecdote that resonated exactly what you were saying, your style of management. And this is my alarm that I need to take off because I'm chairing this this next talk. But I just want to say that from my point of view, I was the safety, I'm a physician, so I was the safety diver officer for an expedition that was in the middle of nowhere in Turkey. And this is for an archaeological excavation that was 2,500 years old. Okay, we had people from all over the world coming in here and to that site, which was very remote, as I said, and difficult to get access to food, service, anything. Then what happened is, I cannot explain you what happened exactly because then I will get in trouble, but we had contamination of the water, okay? I was the one that figured it out because I had that training, but everybody was getting sick. And we were all getting sick. So you know what I said to them? Because they were paranoid, or we're gonna die. And I said, if we're going to find the answer, okay? And if we die, I'm dying with you. But what happens is, I let them loose. I could take care of the very sick people because I knew I had the capability, but I could not take care of everybody. 60 people, okay, on board. So I let them loose and I told them at lunchtime, because everybody was gonna eat, right? And if I tell one person, they go off on a tangent. But I wanted to catch them all at the same time. And I said, we are all in this mess, poo-poo here, but I am dying with you. So I'm not gonna leave you alone. So what happened is that message was so clear in their mind. And I said, you've been trained, you're intelligent people, you come up with answers. I'll take care of this thing, but let's go work on this safety protocol, right? I cannot imagine, they came up with so many answers and so many tricks that I could not have done it myself. So it was amazing to see the power of letting them loose and as competent people that came there for a purpose. And then we resolved that in 2 days. 3 days was my cases that were really sick that I couldn't take them to a hospital. But I was about to call a chopper from the National Guard, from Turkish National Guard, to evacuate. Okay, so imagine that risk, right? But since we're all on the same boat, like I said, we are going to take a mission. And so at that time, the critical thinking skills is very important. And everything that she mentioned resonates with me all the time because I took that risk 3 years in a row. Okay, but if the first year I had not made that decision, we were not going to make it. And the reason I cannot disclose so many things is because then we have National Geographic. And National Geographic was going to give us, we were on TV and we're also on the special issues of National Geographic. So can you imagine that? So I understand exactly what you're saying, and you probably want to be a multiplier, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, does anyone online want to chime in while we move the microphone around?
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I really appreciated the presentation, and I would say that we do share everything. I mean, even if from the Italian perspective, the way which you have presented how to manage an analog situation is exactly the same. And so completely sharing everything. Let me just add one other level of complexity that we had when we ran tests having industry on the field. and in view of XMR's mission, so with a very tight schedule. At that point, the schedule became is the driver of everything else. Of course, safety is a prerequisite, and all the rest. But when you have hardware to be tested on ground and industry guys on the other side of you, then schedule is really the mantra that every morning at the briefing you're going to listen to.
This is Jessica. I just wanted to thank you. That was great. One of the things that I am also seeing is, you know, I'm from NASA, so safety is always first, because as soon as you have that first mishap, that analog will be gone forever. And I'm seeing when we have some analogs that go on for a really long time, people get complacent. And how can we creatively keep energizing the people that are managing it, because their teams are getting smaller, they're having more responsibility, and so basically have to enforce the safety perspective with less people. And it's, I think it's, you know, part of it is economics, there's just less people. But that I think is an interesting challenge for the longevity of maintaining that safety culture. And I know that we repeatedly do it, like at the deployment, or like at the end. I know you stand up and you're like, we're at the end of the mission, almost at the end. It's going to be, this is the most dangerous part because we're all tired. But I think if you look at it, step back and look at it from like maintaining an analog over years, that's the same thing is happening.
All right, we'll have one more and then.
Could I?
Yep, go ahead.
Am I able to just chime in with a comment? So my name's Bonnie, and like I just said, I'm a doctor, having worked in desert analog missions, and just following on from that comment that was just made. So I'm part of a panel of a number of doctors from different analog platforms, and we are trying to work hard to create an affiliate group of the Aerospace Medical Association to provide those resources and that support for any group that wants to dig into it for that medical support and safety aspect. It's still a work in progress at the moment, bearing in mind that there's a variety, a real spectrum of analogs out there, from, like you say, NASA with all the funding and the resources, those much smaller groups who are largely volunteer run and based on people's kind of best wishes. So we're trying to, that's something that's trying to be established with the support of ESA and NASA at the moment.
That's great, and it's great to hear there's a lot of interest in the medical side of things too, so we can try and focus on some of that within this group as well. So thank you for that perspective. So, okay, we're coming up on the 1:30 time here in California. And there's another session of this conference that we're at in this room, so we're going to have to stop the conversation now. But these talks are all being recorded on Zoom, and we will post them on the Survey website as well. That's the plan. So if you miss any, you can go back and you can see them. And we'll be in communication via the email listserv about upcoming seminars and activities. So thank you for your attendance. And thanks, Darlene, for a great talk.